On that particular Mother's Day, my son Christopher transferred $6.60 to my account, accompanied by a message that read, "Mom, times are tight. Hope you don't mind it is so little." I replied simply, "It is the thought that counts." However, moments later, I discovered he had just lavished a generous $80,000 on his mother-in-law. In that instant, my heart felt as though it had been encased in ice. Without hesitation, I sold the house worth $260,000 that I had purchased for him. When he frantically demanded answers, I calmly blocked him from all communication. He believed I would eventually regret my actions, never realizing this was merely the beginning. Thanksgiving arrived with an unseasonable chill in the air. The moon hung outside my window, full and luminous, casting its cold light into my kitchen, though it failed to warm even the smallest corner of my heart. The dining table groaned under the weight of an elaborate feast I had been preparing since midday. Every dish represented Christopher's favorite foods from years past: braised short ribs that fell off the bone, perfectly roasted lobster with drawn butter, delicately steamed salmon, and the apple pie he had been requesting for months. Steam rose from the carefully arranged platters, filling the house with rich, inviting aromas. Yet, in this spacious home that had once echoed with family laughter, only I remained. The sharp chime of my phone shattered the oppressive silence. Christopher's name appeared on the screen. Me heart leaped with unexpected hope. For a fleeting moment, I imagined he was calling to say he was on his way home for dinner, that he had remembered our family traditions after all. Instead, what greeted me was a notification for a mobile money transfer. The screen displayed a stark red background with the words $6.60 in bold, almost mocking letters. Below that, a brief message: "Mom, times are tight. Hope you don't mind it is so little." My finger hovered above the screen, frozen in disbelief. Times are tight. My son, a seemingly successful white-collar professional working at a respectable company, claimed such financial hardship that he could only spare $6.60 for his mother on Thanksgiving. A crushing sensation gripped my chest, as if an invisible hand were slowly tightening around my heart. The pain was dull yet familiar, accompanied by that acidic taste of disappointment I had grown to know so well. I drew a deep breath, struggling to suppress the emotions rising in my throat. I am Catherine, a retired teacher who has always maintained her dignity and composure. After my husband's passing years ago, I single-handedly raised our child through every challenge life presented. With trembling fingers, I carefully typed my response. One letter at a time, it is the thought that counts. I pressed send. Then I tossed the phone onto the sofa, unwilling to look at it any longer. The carefully prepared feast in my kitchen now seemed to mock me with its abundance. I sat at the dining table, staring at the empty chair across from me, lifting my fork, but finding myself unable to take even a single bite of the tender ribs. My stomach churned with nausea, making it impossible to swallow anything. The phone illuminated again with an inadvertent swipe that opened Facebook. The first post to appear belonged to my daughter-in-law, Beatrice. The photograph was vibrant and celebratory. Her mother, Gabrielle, beamed with joy, her weathered face creased with delighted wrinkles as she clutched an enormous, pristine red envelope. Golden lettering proclaimed $80,000 across its surface. In the image, my son Christopher stood attentively beside his mother-in-law, his smile obsequious and utterly foreign to the proud young man I remembered from his youth. The accompanying caption felt like salt in an open wound. So grateful to my thoughtful son-in-law for this holiday surprise. Mom received $80,000 and couldn't be happier about her good health. Women really need to have daughters to find such wonderful sons-in-law. $80,000. $80,000 compared to my $6.60 created a contrast so stark it felt like a physical slap across my face. The fork slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the floor. The sound of shattering porcelain followed as my bowl crashed down beside it. I looked down at the debris scattered across the kitchen tiles, watching the hot soup splash across my feet. Yet I felt no pain whatsoever. Every sensation had been consumed by the bone. Deep chill emanating from my heart. I stood abruptly, my head buzzing with white noise. Memories flooded back of purchasing that $260,000 house for him, depleting half a lifetime of savings and investing most of my retirement fund in the process. I remembered the years after my husband's untimely death, raising Christopher from a helpless infant to a 30-year-old man through countless sacrifices and sleepless nights. He recalled his complaints about workplace pressure, prompting me to allocate half of my monthly retirement income to supplement his household expenses. All of my devotion, all of my sacrifices had culminated in this pitiful $6.60 gesture of filial piety while he simultaneously showered his mother-in-law with $80,000 of largesse. Unable to contain myself any longer, I grabbed my phone and dialed Christopher's number. The phone rang endlessly, so long that I began to think he would not answer. Finally, his voice came through, dripping with irritation. "Mom, what is the matter? I am busy right now having dinner with Beatrice and her mother." Busy? My voice felt like sandpaper. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white, asking slowly and deliberately, "How much money did you transfer to your mother-in-law?" The line fell silent immediately. After several seconds, Christopher's stammering voice returned. "Mom, why are you asking about that? It wasn't much, just a small token of appreciation." "A small token of how much?" I pressed, hearing the tremor in my own voice. At that moment, a shrill female voice seized control of Mom. "What is wrong with 80,000? Her voice carried undisguised mockery and contempt. "Christopher shows respect to our family. Does that somehow concern you? Do you, someone whose retirement income is only a few $1,000s, really understand the pressures Christopher faces in his professional life? He needs to network, socialize, and maintain the respectability of our little family. Every aspect of this requires money. The fact that he sent you $6.60 shows he still thinks about you. What more do you want? Do you actually expect $80,000? Do you deserve it?" Those final 3 words struck like poisoned daggers, piercing straight through my heart. Do I deserve it? I, the mother who raised him through countless hardships and sacrificed everything for his future, apparently do not deserve even basic filial consideration from my own son. My entire world collapsed in that moment. Beatrice ended the call with a sharp click. Only the dial tone remained, proclaiming my complete defeat with its relentless buzz. She stood in my devastated kitchen, my body shaking uncontrollably. Rage, humiliation, heartbreak, and countless other emotions crashed together in my chest, threatening to tear me apart from within. An unprecedented coldness rose from the soles of my feet, spreading rapidly throughout my entire body before crystallizing in my gaze. I looked at Beatrice's triumphant face on my phone screen and found myself smiling. The smile was silent and tearless. The greatest sorrow comes when the heart dies completely. I finally understood that I had not raised a son, but rather an adult parasite who had been sucking my life force, a puppet completely controlled by his wife and mother-in-law. A crystal-clear memory surfaced in my mind. 3 years earlier, in the real estate office, where we finalized the purchase of that house, I had swiped my final credit card to complete the $260,000 payment in full. The agent complimented me effusively. "Catherine, you are truly an exceptional mother. Not many parents today can purchase a house outright for their children." Christopher had embraced me emotionally at the time, his eyes growing misty. "Mom, you can rest assured that I will take excellent care of you from now on and provide for you in your old age." Moved by his words and wanting to give him security and dignity in front of Beatrice, I generously suggested that only his name appear on the property deed. However, he seemed somewhat uneasy about this arrangement and proactively suggested, "Mom, perhaps we should sign an agreement, since you are the one actually purchasing this house." At the time, I interpreted this as genuine filial concern and did not think deeply about it. But reflecting now, it might have been an instinctive response born from guilt. I had maintained some caution. At my insistence, we visited a law office. I requested my old friend, Attorney Johnson, to draft a private agreement. The document clearly stated in black and white, although this property is registered under Christopher's name, the actual purchaser and full financial contributor is his mother, Catherine. Christopher possesses only residential rights to this property and must fulfill legal obligations to support Catherine. Should Christopher engage in obvious unfilial behavior, abuse, abandonment, or attempt to dispose of this property without Catherine's consent, Catherine reserves the right to reclaim the property or demand compensation at market value. Christopher, eager to obtain the property deed for his upcoming marriage to Beatrice, barely glanced at the agreement before signing his name with flourish and pressing his fingerprint to the document. He had undoubtedly forgotten about the existence of this agreement long ago. But I remembered every single detail. I retrieved that yellowed agreement from the most secure drawer in my study. Every word on it now gleamed with cold precision. I dialed Attorney Johnson's number. "Hello, Catherine. Happy Thanksgiving." Johnson's cheerful voice greeted me. My voice, however, was eerily calm. "Michael, I need your assistance." I methodically recounted everything that had transpired that evening, including my decision. "I want to sell this house." The line remained silent for a considerable time. Attorney Johnson was probably stunned by my resolution. "Catherine, are you certain about this? This is not a minor matter." "I could not be more certain," I replied, without the slightest wavering in my tone. "Comes when the heart dies, and mine died tonight." That agreement is legally binding, especially given that you provided full payment with clear bank transaction records as proof. Christopher's unfilial behavior constitutes a breach of contract. I understand and will handle this for you. I previously had you sign a power of attorney for property disposition as a precautionary measure. Remember? I'll activate that immediately. You can trust me to find the most reliable channels and expedite this process. After ending the call, I walked to the refrigerator. A family photograph was still attached to its surface. It showed me Christopher and Beatrice. In the picture, all three of us appeared to be smiling happily, resembling a harmonious family. How utterly ironic. I reached out and slowly, methodically tore that photograph into countless pieces. The false smiles in the image fractured into fragments, like my own shattered heart. Within just 3 days, everything was concluded. Was sold for its market value of $260,000 to a young couple eager to move in immediately. I transferred all remaining funds from my old account, which had been linked to my mobile payment app for Christopher's monthly subsidies, then went to the bank to close that account entirely. After completing these tasks, I opened Facebook and posted a simple status update. The content was straightforward. Some things in this world seem to belong to you, but were never truly yours to begin with. I attached an image of a blank property deed page that I had deliberately blurred, making it recognizable as official documentation while obscuring specific details. I set this post's visibility to limited. Only 2 people could see it, Christopher and Beatrice. Then I clicked on Christopher's profile, selected Remove Contact, and checked the option to Add to Block List. I blocked his phone number as well. From that moment forward, mountains were high and waters ran deep between us, and we would never meet again. I turned off my phone, walked to the window, and gazed at the still, brilliant moonlight outside. My heart held no sense of revenge or satisfaction, only an unprecedented tranquility and liberation. Catherine, from today onward, you live only for yourself. 2 days later, the storm arrived as expected. I was peacefully watering plants in my new rental apartment, When my backup phone number rang, unfamiliar local number appeared on the screen. I answered and immediately heard Beatrice's hysterical shrieking. "Catherine, what did you do to our house? What gives you the right to change our locks?" Her voice was so shrill it made my eardrums ache. I could easily imagine her current state of absolute fury. Christopher had probably brought her and her precious mother to tour that $260,000 house, perhaps to show off his filial devotion, only to discover their key no longer worked and the interior had been completely emptied. I held the phone at arm's length, speaking as calmly as if discussing the weather. "I sold the house. The money is in my account." Deadly silence followed on the other end. I could actually hear Beatrice's heavy breathing, filled with incredulous rage. His voice trembled with tears. "Mom, have you lost your mind? That was my house. How could you sell my house?" "Yours." I laughed coldly, repeating his words. "Christopher, put your hand on your conscience and ask yourself, which brick, which tile of that house did you earn money to purchase yourself?" The initial $260,000 payment came from my life's work and savings in all your years of employment. Have you contributed even 1 penny to this household? Your salary, apart from buying luxury handbags for your wife and sending gifts to your mother-in-law, what remains? On Thanksgiving, you gave your mother-in-law $80,000 without batting an eye. Your own mother sat at home with a table full of cold food, receiving only your $6.60 gesture of thoughtfulness. Christopher, have dogs eaten your conscience? My voice was not loud, but every word struck like a nail driven deep into his heart. Christopher was rendered speechless by my questions. Only his panicked breathing remained audible through the phone. He seemed to remember something, his face turning deathly pale. That agreement. Mom, that agreement is invalid. I am the property owner. My name is on the deed. I am going to sue you. This is illegal appropriation, he shouted with false bravado. Illegal appropriation. I chuckled, my tone dripping with sarcasm. Go ahead and sue me. While you are at it, let the judge examine your bank statements. Review your transfer records to your mother-in-law. And then look at what you sent me. Let's see whether the law protects unfilial sons like you or mothers who have been bled dry by their children. By the way, that agreement was signed in the presence of Attorney Johnson and is completely legally binding. Have you forgotten? It clearly states in black and white that if you engage in obviously unfilial behavior, I have the right to dispose of the property. Giving your mother-in-law $80,000 while giving me $6.60? Would you not consider that obviously unfilial? I believe any person with a conscience would have a clear answer. Excellent. I'll be waiting. I maintained my flat tone. The buyer's contact information and property transaction contracts are all backed up with Attorney Johnson. The sale has been completed, and the deed has been transferred. If you have any objections, take them up directly with my lawyer. With that, I hung up immediately. I could predict their next moves, confusion, fury, and desperate attempts at every possible recourse. Christopher and Beatrice refused to accept defeat. They contacted the new owners through the real estate agency. The new homeowners, a straightforward middle-aged couple, simply presented their official property deed bearing fresh red seals alongside their legitimate purchase contracts, telling them, "We bought this house with our own hard-earned money. All paperwork is complete and legal. If you have disputes, take them up with whoever sold you the house, but don't bother us." That single statement blocked every avenue of recourse. They finally realized I was not joking. The $260,000 house they had considered their assured inheritance was truly irretrievably gone. After confirming that the house had indeed been sold beyond any hope of recovery, Christopher and Beatrice descended into complete madness. Rather than seeking legal counsel as I had anticipated, they chose a more insidious path that better suited their characters, waging a campaign of public opinion. Overnight, I became the evil mother in our circle of relatives and friends. Christopher and Beatrice went everywhere spreading their sob story, turning truth on its head and painting me as a money-obsessed maniac who would destroy her son's marriage and family for financial gain. They carefully avoided mentioning the $6.60 versus $80,000 disparity, instead repeatedly emphasizing how I had mercilessly sold their only home, leaving them homeless. My phone began receiving calls from various unfamiliar and familiar numbers in relentless succession. Distant relatives I had not contacted in years called with condescending advice. "Catherine, people should leave room for forgiveness. Christopher may have done wrong, but he is still your flesh and blood." Former colleagues offered false sympathy. "Catherine, we all know raising a child alone wasn't easy for you, but you can't be so extreme. Aren't you pushing the child toward a dead end?" Even my cousin, who had not visited in 8 centuries, appeared at my door with a basket of fruit, earnestly urging me to return the money to Christopher. "We're all family here. What can't be discussed and resolved? Creating such drama only brings shame to yourself." I ignored them all. I refused to answer phone calls or respond to text messages. For the mediators who came to my door, I simply told them through the closed door, "This is my personal family matter and does not require your concern." Then I had Attorney Johnson send strongly worded legal notices to several of the most troublesome relatives, clearly stating they were spreading false information and defaming my character. If they did not cease immediately, I would reserve the right to pursue legal action. The world became instantly peaceful, seeing that the family sentiment offensive had failed. Beatrice began causing trouble online. Using an anonymous account, she published a tearful essay on Reddit titled, "Crying Blood Accusation. My evil mother-in-law sold our house for $260,000, forcing us toward desperation." In the article, she portrayed herself as a perfect daughter-in-law who deeply loved her husband and respected her in-laws, yet was mercilessly oppressed by her evil mother-in-law. She described how I looked down on her humble origins, how I made things difficult for her in countless ways, and finally how I insanely destroyed their small family for money. She included several selfies showing herself with red, swollen eyes and a haggard appearance, looking pitiful and sympathetic. The article quickly gained attention, and uninformed netizens were manipulated by her narrative. The comment section filled with abuse directed at me. "This mother-in-law has lost her mind. Is this how you treat your own son? $260,000. Does this old woman want to take the money to her grave? A mama's boy paired with an evil mother-in-law. This daughter-in-law truly has terrible luck." Attorney Johnson discovered the article immediately and sent me screenshots asking how I wanted to handle the situation. I looked at those vile insults with complete inner calm. "Fight back," I replied with just 2 words. I compiled all the records from recent years of my financial transfers to Christopher to supplement his living expenses. I also retrieved chat logs from several years ago when I was hospitalized with illness. Christopher and Beatrice never visited even once, instead calling only to ask how much my medical insurance would cover. I provided all this evidence to Attorney Johnson. Most crucially, I had Attorney Johnson publish 2 screenshots side by side. One showed Christopher's transfer of $6.60 to me. The other showed Beatrice's Facebook post about Christopher giving her mother $80,000. No additional text was needed. Only these cold, hard facts. Attorney Johnson issued a legal statement on my behalf, including bank records proving my full payment for the house purchase, alongside those 2 starkly contrasting transfer screenshots. The statement clearly presented the facts and warned Beatrice that her actions constituted defamation, threatening immediate legal action. Public opinion reversed instantly. The enormous contrast between $6.60 versus $80,000 exploded like a bomb, stunning all the netizens who had blindly attacked me. My goodness, what a reversal. $660 for his real mother, $80,000 for his mother-in-law. What breed of ultimate filial son is this? I take back my earlier words. This mother-in-law did the right thing. Why keep such a son and daughter, in-law around for Christmas? Precision poverty. Relief-style filial piety, stingy toward his own mother. Throwing money at his mother-in-law. Has this man's brain been flooded? So it was a gold-digging woman manipulating a mama's boy, working together to drain the original family dry. This mother-in-law handled it beautifully, cutting her losses in time. The comment section under Beatrice's tearful essay completely changed direction. Netizens who had previously sympathized with her began frantically tagging her, demanding to know why she dared not mention the $80,000. Beatrice, probably guilty and panicked, quickly deleted the post and deactivated her account. But it was too late. Screenshots had already spread across the internet. She and Christopher became the laughingstock of the entire city. My image transformed instantly from evil mother-in-law to clear-minded victim fighting back admirably. The crushing defeat in the public opinion war led Christopher and Beatrice to completely drop their pretenses, unwilling to lose everything. And with Beatrice's encouragement, they filed a lawsuit against me. Their legal demand was simple. They wanted the court to declare my sale of the house to the new owners invalid and order immediate return of the property. Their reasoning claimed I had maliciously transferred their marital assets. On the day of the hearing, I wore a modest suit with my hair impeccably styled, sitting calmly in the defendant's chair. Across from me, Christopher and Beatrice both looked terrible. Beatrice's eyes burned with poison as she stared at me fixedly, as if trying to dismember me with her gaze. Christopher kept his head down throughout, unable to look at me even once. The once spirited young man now resembled a defeated rooster, dejected and pathetic. Their attorney, a seemingly sharp young man, spoke passionately, insisting I had illegally appropriated property and claiming the so-called private agreement between Christopher and me was forged by me unilaterally and lacked legal validity. Your Honor, as everyone knows, real estate ownership is determined by registration. This property is registered under my client, Christopher's name, and rightfully belongs to him as personal property. His mother, Catherine, without the property owner's consent, sold this property without authorization, seriously violating my client's legitimate rights. I listened quietly, the corner of my mouth even curving into an imperceptible smile. Then it was Attorney Johnson's turn to speak. He stood up and walked unhurriedly to the bench, first presenting a thick stack of materials to the judge. Your Honor, I will submit the following evidence to the court. First, bank transaction records showing the complete $260,000 payment for the property in question. All funds were transferred from my client Catherine's personal account, sufficiently proving that Catherine is the sole actual contributor for this property. Second, this is the original property holding and support agreement, voluntarily signed by Catherine and Christopher 3 years ago in the presence of a third-party attorney. Attorney Johnson displayed a copy of the agreement on the courtroom's large screen via projector. The core clauses were highlighted in red, clear, and prominent. This agreement explicitly states that while the property is registered under Christopher's name, ownership belongs to the actual contributor, Catherine. Christopher possesses only residential rights and must fulfill support obligations toward Catherine. Should Christopher fail to meet support obligations or engage in obviously unfilial, abusive, or abandoning behavior constituting breach of contract, Catherine reserves the right to unilaterally dispose of the property. Your Honor, please note the final page of the agreement, bearing Christopher's personal signature and clear fingerprint. When that agreement bearing his own signature appeared on the large screen, Christopher's body jerked violently, his face instantly turning pale as paper. He was probably finally remembering 3 years ago when, eager to reassure me and quickly obtain the house for his marriage, he had perfunctorily signed this document without giving it any serious consideration. Beatrice was also stunned. She whipped her head toward Christopher, her eyes filled with shock and anger, her lips moving soundlessly as if cursing him as an idiot. Their attorney clearly had not expected such an agreement to exist. His composed confidence crumbled instantly. He tried to struggle. Your Honor, the legality of this agreement is questionable. This constitutes additional conditions in a gift contract. We contend that. Attorney Johnson directly interrupted him. Objection. Opposing counsel's characterization is incorrect. This is not a simple gift contract, but rather a holding agreement with clear rights and responsibilities. My client did not gift the property, but rather entrusted her son to hold it on her behalf. The agreement's core purpose is to clarify actual property ownership and obligations the holder must fulfill. Christopher, as a person with full civil capacity, confirmed his acceptance and willingness to abide by the agreement terms by signing it. Attorney Johnson paused, turning his gaze toward Christopher's ashen face. Now, I want to ask Plaintiff Christopher just one question. On Thanksgiving Day, transferring $6.60 to the mother who gave birth to and raised you while simultaneously giving $80,000 to your mother-in-law, does this behavior constitute the obviously unfilial conduct specified in the agreement? The entire courtroom fell silent. The judge's penetrating gaze shot directly toward Christopher. Christopher's lips trembled. Unable to utter a single word, sweat beaded on his forehead and trickled down his cheeks. In that moment, victory and defeat were decided. The court declared a temporary recess. Christopher and Beatrice collapsed in their chairs like marionettes whose strings had been cut. Beatrice could no longer contain herself. In a lowered but venomous voice, she hissed at Christopher. "Idiot! You are such an idiot! You signed such an important agreement without even reading it. Now look. The house is gone. Everything's ruined." Christopher, thoroughly berated, could not raise his head, only mumbling, "I forgot. I really forgot." Yes, he had forgotten. He remembered only that his name was on the property deed, only that this $260,000 asset allowed him to stand tall before his wife and mother-in-law. But he forgot that this asset came with attached responsibilities and obligations. I sat on a bench in the rest area as Attorney Johnson handed me a cup of warm water. "Catherine, are you all right?" I shook my head. Actually, my emotions were quite complex. Seeing Christopher in such a devastated state brought me no anticipated satisfaction, but rather an indescribable sadness. After all, this was the son I had raised with my own hands. I confided more details to Attorney Johnson. Michael actually signing that agreement years ago was not entirely spontaneous. I told him that the year before buying the house, I had fallen seriously ill and required surgery. During my hospitalization, Christopher and Beatrice knew I was physically weak, but never once considered coming to care for me. They only called repeatedly to probe about my condition and indirectly inquire about my savings and retirement funds. Christopher even once asked me directly, "Mom, how much will your medical insurance cover for this surgery? Will the remaining money be enough? Maybe you should give me the password to that certificate of deposit account, just in case something happens and I need to help you withdraw money." Those words felt like a bucket of ice water poured over my head. I realized that during my serious illness, my son's primary concern was not my health, but my money. After recovering from that major illness, I became completely clear. Headed. I realized I could not place all my hopes in this selfish son. Therefore, when buying the house, I followed Attorney Johnson's advice and insisted on signing that agreement. It was the final line of defense I created for myself. After hearing this, Attorney Johnson remained silent for a long time, his eyes filled with sympathy. "Catherine, you have suffered greatly." He patted my hand. "Don't worry. I'll immediately request the court to accept additional evidence." He immediately obtained my hospitalization records from that time, along with those chat logs where Christopher repeatedly asked me about money. He even found several transfer records where Christopher borrowed money from me under pretenses of starting a business or investing, money that was never repaid. All of this constituted iron clad evidence of his long-term financial exploitation and emotional neglect toward me. The trial resumed. Attorney Johnson presented each piece of new evidence to the court. Your Honor, you can see that Plaintiff Christopher has not only failed to fulfill support obligations toward his mother over an extended period, but has consistently treated his mother, Catherine, as a personal ATM for unlimited withdrawals during her serious illness. He showed no concern or care, focusing only on her finances. All of this behavior seriously violates human ethics and constitutes fundamental breach of the property holding and support agreement. That agreement was not the product of my client's momentary impulse, but rather the final safeguard established by a desperate mother after seeing through her son's true nature. Attorney Johnson's voice rang powerfully throughout the courtroom. Every sentence struck like a heavy hammer against Christopher and Beatrice's hearts. Christopher's hypocritical mask of filial son was completely torn away, revealing the greedy, selfish face beneath. The judge's expression grew increasingly grave, his look toward Christopher filled with stern condemnation. Plaintiff, do you have any rebuttal to the evidence presented by defendant's counsel? Christopher's lips moved wordlessly, his face deathly pale, unable to speak a single word. He knew it was all over. I looked at him, and the last trace of reluctance in my heart evaporated completely. I even revealed to Attorney Johnson a secret they would never know. Michael, besides this house, I actually own a small property in Florida that I never told him about. My personal savings are also far more than he imagines. These are my trump cards for retirement, and I absolutely will not let him touch even one penny. This was my wisdom and my self-rescue. I would never again be that foolish mother who gave everything only to end up wounded. The moment of the court's verdict arrived, and the entire world seemed to fall silent. The judge's solemn voice rang out. After deliberation, this court finds that the property holding and support agreement signed between Plaintiff Christopher and defendant Catherine is legal and valid. Plaintiff Christopher's long-term failure to fulfill support obligations specified in the agreement, his unfilial behavior with clear facts and solid evidence, constitutes fundamental breach of contract. Defendant Catherine's disposal of the property in accordance with agreement provisions was legal. Therefore, all claims by plaintiffs Christopher and Beatrice are denied. The gavel fell with finality. Christopher and Beatrice sat stunned like wooden statues. Beatrice's body swayed, nearly collapsing to the floor, her mouth unconsciously repeating, "How can this be happening? How can this be happening?" Christopher seemed to have his soul drained away, staring ahead with empty eyes as if he had not yet recovered from the shock of defeat. Their only property, their future life security, their proud capital, was completely and utterly gone. Not only that, but because Christopher had originally taken on symbolic mortgage payments when buying the house to save face, even though I usually helped him make those payments, now with the house gone, he still carried several tens of thousands of dollars in bank debt. Walking out of the courthouse, the sunlight was blinding. My mood was not as light as I had imagined, but rather filled with deep exhaustion. Personally bringing my own son to the defendant's chair and then personally severing all his hopes was, in its own way, a form of torture for me as well. But I had no regrets. Better short-term pain than prolonged suffering. The aftermath of this lawsuit quickly fermented, because Attorney Johnson shared the verdict and case details online in a way that protected privacy while educating the public about legal matters. Christopher and Beatrice's glorious deeds were once again thrust into the spotlight. Christopher's company management called him for discussions, and colleagues looked at him with disdain and alienation. Who would want to work alongside someone capable of calculating against and mistreating his own mother? Beatrice's situation was even worse. As a sales manager who depended on reputation, the gold digger label stuck to her resulted in client defections and plummeting performance. The enormous pressure and despair caused this once loving couple to turn completely against each other. I heard they engaged in fierce arguments every day in their rental apartment. Beatrice hysterically cursed Christopher as worthless as an idiot who had ruined her life and their future. Christopher, unable to bear Beatrice's accusations under immense regret and pressure, even came to physical blows with her. Finally, after another episode of frenzied arguing, Christopher's phone rang, seeing my number. He grasped it like a final lifeline. The moment the call connected, he began sobbing.
"Mom, I was wrong."
"I really know I was wrong. Please forgive me this once. Give me back the money. I'll divorce Beatrice, and I'll be a devoted son to you from now on. I'll be your servant if necessary." His crying was pitiful, filled with desperation. In the past, I might have softened. But now my heart had become hard as stone. I listened quietly as he finished, then replied in a voice so cold it carried no emotion whatsoever. "Too late. Your filial piety died the moment you chose $6.60 over $80,000. Furthermore, I am not your personal ATM, nor am I a harbor you can return to for withdrawals whenever you make mistakes. Your life from the moment you chose to betray me has nothing to do with me." I hung up again, cleanly and decisively. Christopher refused to give up. He sent numerous text messages, all filled with repentance and pleading. I replied with only one message. The money has been invested in a trust company's conservative retirement financial product, with a long-term contract. It cannot be withdrawn. Take care of yourself. This arrangement, made with Attorney Johnson's help, both secured my later years and completely severed his expectations. Reading this message, Christopher fell into complete despair. A few days later, an unexpected person came to find me. It was Beatrice's mother, Gabrielle. She blocked the entrance to my apartment building, and upon seeing me, immediately assumed an expression of heartfelt anguish, attempting to appeal to my emotions. "In-law, look at this mess we're in. The palm and back of the hand are both flesh, and Christopher, however wrong he may be, is still flesh of your flesh. For the sake of blood kinship, please spare him this once. Give them the money so they can live properly." Looking at that face which had once beamed with joy upon receiving $80,000, I found it utterly ironic. "Gabrielle, I did not even bother calling her in-law anymore. When your daughter encouraged my son to give you $80,000, where was your concern for blood kinship? Now that they're desperate, you suddenly remember? Let me tell you, my money is mine. To whom I choose to give it is my freedom. Now, I will not give them a single penny. Instead of wasting time blocking me here, you should go home and properly educate your precious daughter about basic human decency." I walked around her and straight into the apartment building, leaving her shocked and humiliated face far behind. After being publicly exposed and shamed by me, Gabrielle slunk away. But I knew this would not end so easily. Someone like Beatrice would stop at nothing to achieve her goals. Sure enough, several nights later, I was awakened by violent pounding on my door. "Old hag, open up. Give us back our money." Several unfamiliar male voices shouted crude insults outside. I peered through the peephole and saw several thuggish young men aggressively kicking my security door, creating loud banging sounds. My heart tightened with fear, but I did not panic. I immediately called 911 and quietly moved to the window to activate the high-definition surveillance equipment that Attorney Johnson had recommended I install. Seeing that I would not open the door, the thugs became even more brazen. They began splashing red paint on my door while shouting various vulgarities. "If you don't return the money, next time it'll be acid. Old woman, be smart about this and don't force us to get violent." Their threats were clearly recorded by the surveillance cameras. What I had not expected was that as they prepared to leave after their rampage, a woman emerged from the shadows of a nearby apartment building. It was Beatrice. The surveillance footage clearly showed her cautiously looking around before pulling a stack of cash from her bag and handing it to the lead thug. The thug took the money with a leering smile, said something, while Beatrice viciously pointed at my door and gave further instructions. This entire scene was captured in crystal clear detail by my camera. The evidence was ironclad. I immediately sent this video to Attorney Johnson and provided the original files to the arriving police. Seeing such clear evidence, the police immediately launched an investigation. The next morning, those troublemaking thugs were arrested. Faced with irrefutable evidence, they quickly revealed the mastermind behind their actions, Beatrice, that afternoon. While Beatrice was at work, police officers came directly to her office and took her away. She was summoned on charges of disturbing the peace and instigating extortion attempts. This news exploded like a bomb in their social circle. Beatrice was completely panicked. She probably never imagined that this old woman she considered weak and easily bullied would be so calm and decisive, keeping such evidence in reserve. This time, Christopher's call came almost immediately. He was no longer crying, but his voice was filled with unprecedented fear and pleading. He rushed to my apartment building and, upon seeing me, fell to his knees right in front of passing neighbors. Mom, please, I beg you. Please show mercy and forgive Beatrice this once." He clutched my legs, sobbing uncontrollably. "If she really gets arrested, our family will be completely finished. I'll be finished too, Mom. I'll kowtow to you." With that, he actually began knocking his head against the cold concrete. People around us stopped to stare and point. Looking at his utterly humble appearance, my heart remained ice cold. I bent down and whispered in his ear, in a voice only we could hear. "Christopher, in your heart, is Beatrice's happiness more important than my dignity?" When she pointed at my nose and called me unworthy, "Where were you? When she conspired with you to drain my life's work to please her mother, where were you then? Now that she must face consequences for her malicious actions, you finally think to come begging me? Are you only now feeling regret?" Each of my words made his trembling more violent. He looked up, face streaming with tears, eyes filled with desperation and pleading. I straightened up, looking down at him with no trace of pity in my eyes. "Get up, stop making a spectacle of yourself here. In this matter, I will not relent. This is what Beatrice deserves. It is the price she must pay for all the harm she has inflicted upon me. Neither you nor I have the right to plead for her." With that, I turned and walked into the building without another glance. Behind me, his despairing wails echoed. Beatrice's downfall came even faster than I had anticipated. Due to criminal charges, she was quickly terminated from her company. Her family, which had always taken such pride in her, completely collapsed. When her parents learned their daughter had hired thugs to harass her former mother-in-law and would likely face imprisonment, they first called me with angry accusations, then desperate pleading. And finally, finding me unmoved, became utterly disappointed in their daughter and stopped taking her calls entirely. They probably felt completely disgraced. Christopher, after seeking help everywhere to no avail, also fell into complete despair. He waited outside the detention center but could not even see Beatrice. The enormous blow completely shattered this already weak man's spirit. Returning to the small rental apartment and facing the chaos left after Beatrice's arrest, he finally exploded in unprecedented conflict with Beatrice's family members, who had rushed back. Ultimately, the heartbroken Beatrice, through her attorney, filed for divorce from Christopher. The reason was simple. Christopher was incompetent, had failed to protect the house, and lacked the ability to protect her. She did not want to spend the rest of her life with a man who had nothing and was burdened with debt. Christopher wanted to reconcile. But Beatrice's attitude was absolutely firm. Perhaps from the moment the house was sold, that fragile loves built on material foundation had already vanished completely. They quickly agreed to divorce. Christopher essentially left with nothing except several tens of thousands of dollars in mortgage debt and some personal obligations. When I learned of Christopher's divorce through Attorney Johnson, I was in a painting class at Senior University, working on a landscape. My paintbrush paused momentarily, then steadily returned to the paper. My heart remained completely calm, with only a trace of tranquil understanding of worldly affairs. I did not stop there. Through reliable channels, I inadvertently shared news of Beatrice's arrest, Christopher's divorce, and his departure with nothing to our former mutual relatives and friends. I wanted everyone to see clearly what kind of people this was. He sought new employment but faced rejection everywhere. He tried borrowing money from friends, but those who had once called him brother now avoided him entirely. Desperate, he came to me once again. This time he did not kneel, but stood at my door like a lost soul, gaunt and disheveled. His hair was unkempt, his beard scraggly, his eyes hollow, and his once crisp shirt had become wrinkled and dirty. Looking at me, his lips moved, but ultimately he fell to his knees again with another thud. This time, his tears flowed silently. "Mom, I really have nowhere else to turn. Please, give me one more chance." His voice was hoarse, filled with endless regret and desperation. Seeing him like this, some corner of my heart seemed lightly touched, but that insignificant ripple was quickly covered by deeper disappointment. If you had known this day would come, why did you ask? Christopher knelt before me, repeating, "I was wrong," over and over. He described his miserable circumstances during this period. No job, no wife, no friends, penniless. I listened quietly without interrupting. When he finished, I looked at his haggard face with eyes that no longer held resentment, only bone, deep exhaustion, and disappointment. "Son," I began calmly, and this term of address felt strangely unfamiliar coming from my mouth. "It is all too late." Rather than continue accusations, I simply reviewed the past like an objective observer. "Do you remember, when you were in college? I went 2 months without buying myself a single new piece of clothing so I could afford the latest MacBook for you. After you started working. The first time you brought Beatrice home, she mentioned liking seafood. I searched the entire market to prepare a table full of seafood for you, but you immediately showed me attitude because she thought I had not properly deveined the shrimp. When I was hospitalized and most needed companionship, you only called to ask how much medical expenses cost, and when I would be discharged, afraid it might interfere with your vacation with Beatrice, and your father's old watch, which you quietly took to give to your father-in-law without saying a word. I listed each incident, each grievance, with perfect calm. With every item I mentioned, Christopher's head hung lower, and his trembling grew more violent. These details he had long forgotten were permanent scars on my heart. "Christopher, all your coldness, exploitation, and betrayal toward me did not begin with $6.60 versus $80,000. That was merely the final straw. You did not suddenly become bad. You have always been this selfish." I stood up, retrieved my new iPad from inside, opened the photo album, and handed it to him. The screen showed pictures of my new life. In my new rental apartment, the balcony overflowed with flowers and plants. In the senior university classroom, I studied painting and dancing with a group of new friends. At a scenic seaside town, I traveled with old girlfriends, laughing joyfully. In the photographs, I appeared radiant and spirited, completely different from the mother who had once revolved around him with constant worry and sorrow. I have already arranged my retirement life. I have new friends, new hobbies, new plans. My life no longer requires you. I do not need your false compensation, much less your so-called filial piety. Christopher looked at the photographs of me, his expression slowly changing from pleading to complete despair and deadness. He finally understood that I was not throwing a tantrum or punishing him. I had truly, completely given up on him. He had been thoroughly erased from my life. He slowly rose from the ground, lost and dejected, like a puppet drained of all vitality. He looked deeply at me one last time, with an expression too complex for me to understand. Then he turned and walked down the stairs step by step, his retreating figure utterly defeated and desolate. I closed the door, leaned against it, and exhaled deeply. I knew that from this moment forward, that suffocating mother-son relationship between us had finally truly come to an end. Several days later, I began packing my belongings. I decided to leave this city where I had lived for decades, a place filled with too many painful memories. I would go somewhere. Before moving, I made one final visit to the room that had once belonged to Christopher. I packed everything belonging to him, his books, his clothes, his childhood awards, and threw them all into the building's recycling bins, as if he had never existed in this home. I ultimately chose to settle in a warm seaside town in California. Using part of the money from selling the house, I purchased a small but sunlit apartment where opening the windows revealed the azure Pacific Ocean in the distance. Life here moved at a gentle pace with genuine human warmth. I quickly integrated into the local community. I enrolled in watercolor painting and yoga classes at the community senior university, rediscovering hobbies I had abandoned in my youth due to life's demands. My painting evolved from initial clumsiness to gradually developing my own style, even winning a small award at a community art exhibition. My yoga practice also improved steadily, and together with a group of newly met sisters, we became the most vibrant sight in our neighborhood. I was no longer the Catherine who revolved only around the stove and her son. I had rediscovered myself. I invested the remaining money wisely, part in stable financial products sufficient to support my comfortable retirement. The other portion I used to establish a small scholarship fund in my deceased husband's name, specifically supporting academically excellent children from single-parent families like mine. Whenever I received thank you letters from these children and saw their hopeful faces, I felt a fulfillment and happiness that Christopher had never given me. This was my true value, where my money should rightfully go. Occasionally, I would hear news about Christopher and Beatrice from friends back home. Beatrice was ultimately convicted of multiple charges, including instigating disturbances and attempted extortion, sentenced to 1 year in prison. After release, her life was ruined. She could only work odd jobs at small restaurants, living in poverty. Christopher's situation was even more miserable. Without work or family, burdened by debt, he struggled at society's bottom. I heard he later went to construction sites but could not endure the hardship, quitting after just a few days, ultimately surviving on occasional odd jobs, becoming old and defeated. Hearing this news barely rippled the surface of my heart. I felt neither vindictive satisfaction nor any sympathy. Their lives were the results of their own choices, and I, having freed myself from their burden, welcomed the second spring of my life. My old friend Attorney Johnson, along with several close friends, flew to visit me. Seeing me in bright yoga clothes laughing radiantly in the sunshine, they were amazed. "Catherine, you look younger and more beautiful now than you did 10 years ago." I laughed and invited them to a seaside restaurant for the freshest seafood. During our meal, we talked about the past, present, and future. I wrote a journal documenting my journey from a long-suffering mother to an independent woman living for herself. On the journal's first page, I wrote, "A woman is first herself, then a mother, wife, or daughter. Learning to love yourself is the beginning of a lifelong romance." I finally understood that true redemption comes not from others' repentance, but from one's own awakening and release. Several years later, in spring, I received a letter. The letter came from a distant small city I had never heard of, sent by Christopher. It was written on the cheapest lined paper with shaky handwriting filled with weariness. The letter was long, describing in detail his struggles and hardships over recent years. He wrote about working various jobs, being deceived and bullied, experiencing the coldness of human nature and society's harsh realities. He said he finally understood how precious my past devotion had been and how foolish and despicable his behavior was. At the letter's end, he used lengthy passages to express repentance and longing for me, saying he lived in regret every day, and if life could begin again, he would never treat me so poorly. I read every word carefully, then calmly folded it and placed it in the bottom drawer of my desk. I did not reply. Though past wounds had scabbed over, the scars would always remain. Forgiveness felt too heavy a burden. I chose to let go. Some time later, I heard from friends back home that Beatrice's mother, Gabrielle, unable to face relatives and neighbors due to her daughter's imprisonment and son-in-law's downfall, with no one to care for her, lived in misery, often sitting alone at her doorstep sighing. The daughter and son-in-law she had once taken such pride in ultimately became her greatest burden and embarrassment in old age. I listened to all this with the same calm as if hearing a story unrelated to me, because I had long since reclaimed my dignity and happiness, no longer dwelling on past injustices. That is our story for today. We hope you enjoyed this incredible tale. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Subscribe for more captivating stories like this, and don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you for being here with us. See you next time.